Tonight, I want to tell you about my man, the quiet thunder in my chest, the steady hand at my back, the laugh that saves me daily. If you've ever wondered how ordinary days become sacred, settle in. This is our American love story, weathered, warm, and true. For you. Before we begin, tap subscribe, like, see two followers, see 20 feet, and share this story with someone who believes love grows stronger with time. Together. I'm not the sort of man who'd use the word destiny out loud at the VFW or the diner where I order my eggs, but if you could sit here at my kitchen table and feel the dents in this old wood from 1,000 breakfasts, 1,000 notes scribbled and folded into lunch pails, 1,000 soft knocks from my man's knuckles urging me to look up from a crossword and pay him some mind, then you might nod along when I say some love stories don't shout. They settle down beside you and live your life with you. That's what happened with us. No parade, no fireworks. Just two men, a pot of coffee, a porch in the evening, and years that stitched themselves into something strong. I met Tom in 1978, in a hardware store that smelled like pine and machine oil and the kind of dust that turns golden in late afternoon sun. I was 24, still too skinny and too stubborn, working the register while learning to mix paint the exact shade a customer needed from a newspaper clipping. It was a Thursday, our quietest day, and I had the radio low, baseball commentary humming through the aisles. In he walked, carrying trouble in the set of his shoulders, but also hope in his eyes. Not big trouble, just the kind you carry when your mother's kitchen needs patching and you told her you knew what you were doing. "I need a stud finder," he said, looking up at the aisle numbers, cap twisted backward because his hands were full with a rolled-up blueprint that looked more like a placemat than a plan. He didn't look at me the way men sometimes looked then, with distance, like a fence. He looked right at me, open, present, and I felt something shift, like a screen door catching a breeze and swinging just enough to let the scent of rain inside. "We've got two kinds," I said, already moving from behind the counter, wiping my palms on my apron. "One that beeps and lies, and one that doesn't beep and lies less." He laughed, not politely, but with a warmth that touched the worn pegboard and made the nails look almost friendly. "I'll take the one that lies less," he said. "My mother's picture frames are tired of falling." We walked the aisle together, and when I handed him the better one, the heavy one that had a little blue light, his fingers brushed mine. He didn't snatch his hand back, not even a twitch. He just looked at me, and then at the tool, like he understood both were important to him right then. He asked questions that were easy to answer, and one that wasn't. "You ever get to decide when it's time to start over?" he asked, weighing the stud finder like it held more than plastic and wires. "Every day," I said, surprising myself. "Some days you're brave enough to notice." I rang him up, slid the bag across, and because I had not yet learned how to be careful, and maybe because I knew, in the soft parts of me I kept quiet, that careful only gets you so far, I slipped a napkin into the bag with a coffee shop name and a time. 6:30, no name. He could ignore it, or he could show up and tell me I had the wrong idea. Either way, the next choice would not belong to fear. It took everything I had to not stare as he left, but I watched the bell swing on its spring above the door until it settled. He came. At 6:30 sharp, the bell on the diner door sang, and there he was, hair damp from a quick shower, shirt untucked like he'd pulled it on while still thinking about something heavier than clothes. The waitress, Donna, gave me a look that said, "Behave," which was funny because I'd been refilling coffee for years without once trying to start a revolution. Tom slid into the booth across from me, the vinyl squeaking just enough to make him smile. "I'm Tom," he said. "I figured you might want a name to go with the studs." "Sam," I said, my hand sweating against the coffee cup. "Thanks for coming." We talked like it was the first rain after a long drought. Nothing fancy, just that soft drum that makes you feel like the world is washing clean. He was 26, a nurse at the county hospital, 2 months into a new schedule that had his days turned upside down. His mother lived alone, and he'd been trying to make her house safer without admitting she needed him. He liked old music, sang along to Al Green under his breath when he drove, and didn't mind hard work. I told him I was trying to save up enough to buy a little place, something with a porch and a decent maple out front, some dirt I could put my hands in. I told him I played catch with my nephew in the evenings because it felt right to throw and catch and throw again. It's something, the way the world goes on, he said, tracing a circle on the table with his fingertip. You show up at a place with a problem, and a stranger hands you the tool that helps. I like that. We didn't talk about the word most folks avoided. We didn't define anything. We finished our pie, apple for him, pecan for me, and he asked if I wanted to walk. The air was soft, summer holding on. We walked 2 blocks to the river, leaned over the railing, watched the water slip under the bridge lights. He told me a story about his mother standing at the sink, laughing with her whole body at something on the radio. I told a story about my father teaching me to sand a board straight, how your hands know before your eyes sometimes, if only you listen. When he reached for my hand, it was so natural it startled me. Not the bold reach of someone showing off, but the quiet fit of something finding where it belongs. We stood like that a long minute. The town's noise a soft quilt behind us, and then he squeezed and let go. Because there were rules and lives and people who needed us to be careful. We weren't afraid, we were mindful. There's a difference, and it saved us more than once. The next weeks folded into each other like good bread dough. Push, turn, rest. We met after my shift, after his. We drank coffee in my car when rain made the diner windows fog too much. He taught me how to set a bone and not panic when a kid swallowed a marble. I taught him how to fix a hinge so a door doesn't complain every time your mother goes to bed. We didn't rush it. We said goodbye on corners, in doorways, with looks that said more than our mouths could manage. Fall came, and with it, evenings that asked for sweaters and conversations that grew longer because neither of us wanted to head home. He told me about nights at the hospital when worry stood in the corners like a shadow that wouldn't leave. I told him about my boss, who liked the sound of nails counted. We told small truths and bigger ones, and then, one night, we told the truth that mattered most. I want to be the one you call first. I want to be the one who knows. We picked Saturday afternoons. That was ours. We'd drive out of town in my truck, a Ford that rattled just enough to keep us humble. And we'd pull over for roadside apples or honey or a pie, so heavy Donna said it should have paperwork. We found a spot by a lake where the cattails whispered and frogs argued about it being their lake before ours. We'd sit, shoulders touching sometimes, hats pulled down, letting time do what it does if you let it. Show you what's possible when you stay. One Saturday, he asked if I could help him repaint his mother's kitchen. She was out visiting her sister, and he had exactly 8 hours to fix the walls she pretended not to notice. We cleared the counters, moved the table, taped the baseboards. He had no patience for taping, I did. I had no patience for waiting on the roller to stop dripping. He did, we balanced. The paint was called Morning Butter, the kind of name that makes you scoff until the sun hits it at 10 a.m., and you understand. He climbed the step stool, and because life writes its own poetry, he missed just a little, and I caught him. It wasn't a dramatic fall or a sweeping save, just 2 bodies that had learned each other enough to know the right place and time. He stayed there, 1 foot still on the second step, 1 in the air, his hand on my shoulder, my hand under his elbow, both of us laughing because the alternative was the ER, and he had been on call all week. "Guess you found my stud," he said, and then blushed because humor can be a bridge or a canyon. "Yeah," I said, steadying him as he found the rung again. But this one doesn't lie. Later, when we finished, and the whole kitchen glowed like a memory you didn't know you'd kept, we sat on the back stoop and ate sandwiches. He leaned his head on my shoulder like it had always been there. We watched a squirrel dismantle a feeder with the careful intensity of a surgeon. We made a plan, because planning is the kind of love older men like us needed in those years, not because we didn't trust our hearts, but because we respected the world's corners. We planned dinners and errands, birthdays and nurse shifts, holidays we'd show up to and ones we'd skip. We built a map of each other's days, and from it, a path for two. When winter came, it came hard. Our town knows snow the way it knows gossip, thick, constant, and sometimes useful when it covers the worst of what's underneath. We'd meet early to shovel our mother's sidewalks. He'd pile the snow higher than I thought necessary, and small children would later make it into forts and name them after their dogs. After, we'd sit by my window, the one that leaked cold around the edges, and drink cocoa like kids. Sometimes we held hands under the blanket. Sometimes we just let our knees touch. We learned to say goodnight without breaking. We learned to trust morning. Not everyone took to us. There were looks, the kind that find you when you think you've figured out how to be invisible. There were words, too, the kind tossed like rocks from moving cars. We learned to be small in some places and bigger in others, to watch where we parked, to listen to the room. But there were also neighbors who brought extra chili and pretended they'd cooked too much. And there were old men who nodded once and changed the subject, and then made sure our walkway got salted along with theirs. There's a quiet way people show you they're on your side without asking for a speech. We saw those ways. We held on to them. The 80s came with so much music and so much fear. I could tell you facts and numbers and names that still make my chest tight. But this is a love story. And love is the way we kept each other warm when the news was cold. Tom worked nights then, more often than was fair. He'd come home with his shoulders knotted so tight, I could feel the tension with a glance. I learned to draw a bath just the way he liked it. Water deep, music low. He learned to tuck me in on the couch when I fell asleep waiting for him, the blanket arranged like an apology for time stolen by duty. We were careful. We were always careful. We talked about risk like adults, and when the world made us feel older than our years, we held each other with a gentleness we didn't know we had. In 1986, we lost our friend Danny, who made the best cornbread and called everyone honey like he meant it. We made lasagnas, a dozen of them, because grief makes people hungry, and it always helps to have something to do with your hands. We stood in the back of a church that didn't know what to do with us, and we sang anyway. After, we drove to the lake and sat quiet until the stars pressed their cold faces to the water. Tom reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone and put it in my hand. "For when you need something steady to hold," he said. "We'll be each other's steady." We were not saints. We argued about whose turn it was to get up and check why the smoke alarm was chirping. We disagreed about whether you should put ketchup on a hot dog. "You should not," he insisted, with a solemnity that would make you think he'd been sworn in. We found our rhythms and then, sometimes, lost them. But every fight ended the same way, with one of us ruining the dramatic effect by laughing, which is not something you can plan. But if you've ever loved someone long enough to learn their faces in every weather, you know humor is salvation. The day he tried to fix the toilet and flooded our bathroom, I stood in water up to my ankles and said, "Well, at least we know the drain still believes in gravity." And he laughed so hard, he leaned against the door frame like a man convinced of kindness. In 1991, we bought a house. It was not much by magazine standards. The roof shingles argued with wind, the porch rails were more splinter than paint, and the yard grew more weeds than anything else. But it had light, real light, the kind that makes winter think twice. It had a kitchen that wanted company, and we had company to give. We signed the papers, looked at each other across the hood of the car like two kids who'd managed something without reading the instructions, and then we rolled up our sleeves and turned a structure into a home. The first night we slept there, I lay awake listening to the newness, every creak a stranger. Tom's breathing beside me was a rocking chair, slow, even, the sound of belonging. In the morning, he padded to the kitchen and made coffee that tasted like promises. We painted the living room a color that looked like Sunday mornings. We found a porch swing at a yard sale and sanded it smooth and painted it white. And it took us 3 tries to hang it level because patience is harder on ladders. We planted tomatoes that grew like they knew we needed them to succeed. We nailed a little hook by the door for the leash we didn't have yet. And then we went to the shelter and met Mabel, who had a graying muzzle and a tail that thumped so hard it bruised her joy into the air. She chose us the way we chose each other. Like someone had opened a door inside both of us and let the light in. We became a place people came to. Sunday pancakes, Tuesday meatloaf, Friday night cards with Rosa from down the block who swore she'd teach us to salsa and then laughed at how stiff we were. The neighbor kids learned that we had lemonade in the summer and hot chocolate in the winter, and that we would always listen, and that Mabel needed exactly 3 ear scritches before she would roll over. We were the uncles, the guys on the corner with the roses that kept blooming even when you forgot to water them. People left notes on our porch swing. Back at 5 with your bunt pan, or your hosta plant is a miracle. It was a neighborhood the way neighborhoods used to be before everything became a password and a login. We danced in the kitchen when the news turned rough. We turned the radio to Sam Cooke or Aretha, and we moved the way we could, which wasn't much, but it was enough to make us laugh and to say, with our bodies, I'm here. He'd press a kiss to my temple, one of those easy, familiar kisses that tell you everything's still okay, even when it's not. We'd roll dough, and we'd mend socks, and we'd fix the hinge on the cabinet, and we'd talk about our day until it sounded like a story worth keeping. We kept our vacations simple. National parks within driving distance, a rented cabin with a faulty screen door. One summer, we drove all the way to the Badlands. People think they're empty until you sit and watch the light drag itself across those stones, and you realize emptiness is a story we tell when we don't know how to be quiet. We packed sandwiches and listened to baseball on the radio, and argued about whether the clouds looked like a ship or a sleeping bear. He loved the road's hum. I loved the moment he reached for my knee when we switched lanes. We did that for years, the small reaches, the easy touches, the language of long love that doesn't need translation. We made room for losses we couldn't stop. In 2003, Tom's mother passed quietly, with him holding her hand and telling her the kinds of things that make leaving easier, that the kitchen she loved still smelled like cinnamon, that the neighbors' lilacs were fatter than ever, that he'd be all right. He brought home her recipe box, index cards soft from handling, and we cooked her meatloaf with the crumbled saltines she swore by. He cried at the sink, and I dried the dishes, and we made space for grief at the table like a third-place setting. If you've lived long enough, you know that grief isn't a guest who leaves after dessert. It's more like a relative who settles in and learns where the spoons are kept. You learn to work around it. You pass the salt. We got older, and we didn't pretend otherwise. In the mirror, my hair gave up, and his went silver in a way that made him look like a movie star who'd chosen kindness over fame. We learned to read menus with our arms extended, laughed about it, got the glasses anyway. My knee went bad the way a hinge goes bad, one ache at a time, and when I had surgery, he put my socks on in the mornings. Patient. No pity. Just the practical kind of love that says, you did this for me when I was sick, and I will do it for you as many times as it takes. He stacked pillows behind my back just right, and slid the remote within reach, and cut my sandwich on the diagonal because that tastes better. And don't let anyone tell you different. In 2015, when marriage came to our state, Like a long-awaited letter finally making it through, we drove to the courthouse in our Sunday shirts. We didn't need a big production. We'd already built the life. But there's a power in saying yes to the same person in front of a stranger with a stamp. Rosa served as our witness, and she cried more than I've seen anyone cry in such a small room. Tom slipped a ring on my finger that wasn't fancy, but felt like it had been waiting for that exact moment to become itself. We signed, we kissed, quick and sure, and the clerk smiled with her whole face. We went home and danced slow in the kitchen to bring it on home to me. Because of course, and we called ourselves husbands out loud. Not because the word held more love, but because it felt like a key unlocking a door in a house we'd already moved into. You want to know the secret, if there is one? It's not grand gestures, though we had those. It's the grocery lists, and the way he wrote mine in big letters when my eyes got tired. It's the way I kept the good blanket for when he worked late, so he had something soft to come home to. It's the way he took the middle seat on flights, because I'm taller. It's the notes he left. Feed Mabel. Back at 5. Ask Sam about the clouds. That I kept in a jar because someday I knew I'd want to hear his voice from paper. It's the inside jokes that still make me snort coffee. The ones that wouldn't make sense to anyone else. And that's the point. It's the refusal we made, together, to throw the other under the bus just to win an argument. It's choosing, 2 or 3 times a day, to be kind instead of right. When the pandemic came, we learned again how to be a team. Masks by the door. Hand sanitizer that smelled like a distillery. We waved to neighbors from steps 6 feet apart and left casseroles on railings. Tom, retired by then, couldn't help himself. He made phone calls to former colleagues, offered to pick up groceries for anyone who needed them, and kept a list. Because lists were the way he loved past the reach of his arms. We kept the radio on low, read books out loud to each other like we used to when we were too tired to do anything but listen. We made it through, slower, a little more careful, but intact. Then, in a quiet way that I'm only now ready to say out loud, little things started to slip. Keys in the freezer. Names hard to find, like they'd fallen behind the couch cushions and wouldn't come out no matter how you reached. Tom would ask me what day it was, and then ask again 10 minutes later. And the worry in his eyes was a kind of weather I'd never seen. We went to the doctor together, sat shoulder to shoulder, listened to words we didn't want. Early, they said. Early, like that was a gift. We went home and sat at the kitchen table and held hands and made another plan. Because that's what we'd always done. If you're listening, and you've been there, you know that what comes next is not a headline. It's 1,000 small adjustments. Labels on drawers, a checklist on the fridge that read, coffee, breakfast, teeth, smile. We laughed at that last one, not because it was funny, but because we were fighting for light. We set routines like fences, not to keep him in, but to keep fear out. Mornings became sacred. Coffee, 2 cups. Toast with jam, the kind he liked. A walk around the block, me on his left, him on my right, like we were holding each other in place. Afternoons, a nap, a game show, the kind with bells. Evenings, the porch, the birds, the golden hour painting the maple in a way that felt like a blessing you didn't have to earn. We told the people who needed to know. Some took it in stride and showed up with soup, with stories, with the patience that makes a house feel bigger than its walls. Some pulled back, not because they were unkind, but because some fears make people small. We forgave that where we could, not because we're saints, we've covered that, but because the energy it takes to hold a grudge is energy better spent on love. We found a support group, a circle of chairs where men and women sat and said the fragile truths out loud, and we learned from them how to keep joy close. If you ever need proof that love is America's best idea, sit in a room where someone's telling the truth about what scares them, and watch a stranger offer a tissue and a nod. One afternoon, We were on the porch swing. The air had that late summer thickness that makes you think about iced tea and slowing down. Tom looked out at the yard we'd coaxed into behaving, and he said, "I love that you always cut the grass in lines. It makes the yard look like it's telling the truth." I didn't know he knew I did that on purpose. "It's so you can find your way back if you wander," I said, trying to make light of it. He nodded, like that was enough, and then he took my hand and put it on his knee, and we sat like that, the swing creaking a hymn. We've had quiet moments that live in me longer than any vacation could. That was one. Sometimes love is a hand on a knee on a Tuesday. On his good days, he still made me laugh so loud the mailman waved. He'd misremember a word, and then double down with such confidence that we had to treat it like fact. "Pass me the spatulator," he'd say. And I'd hand him the spatula because he was the man who'd taught me to keep moving when trouble thought it had us. On the hard days, I'd find him standing in a room, unsure why he was there, and I'd join him like that was the plan all along. "Looking for the spatulator?" I'd ask, and he'd grin, and we'd be okay. We learned to fold the worry into the day, the way you fold a towel hot from the dryer. Careful, useful, a part of the routine you grew to appreciate because it meant home. I tell you all of this, not because I think our story is different from yours, but because I believe stories like ours add up to something the news can't measure. A neighbor who checks on the guy down the street whose porch light hasn't been on. A teacher who keeps a granola bar in her desk for the kid who always says he's not hungry. A couple, two men, two women, a man and a woman, any two people really who choose each other again and again until choosing becomes the way the day starts. We are not the headline. We're the byline, the footnote, the steady run of ink across 1,000 mornings. Now, when I say my man, I mean 100 things at once. I mean the 26-year-old who walked into my hardware store with a rolly blueprint and a look on his face that said he was ready to learn. I mean the nurse who went back through those automatic doors night after night because someone inside needed him. I mean the husband who danced with me in socked feet on a floor we'd refinished ourselves, and who stood with me under a courthouse fluorescent bulb while a clerk said words that made a door inside both of us swing open. I mean the man who, on days when the map gets fuzzy, trusts me to draw the lines again. I keep a jar of notes he wrote over the years. Some are nothing. Milk, bread, coffee, plums, back by 6 from the pharmacy, and some are everything. You looked so handsome this morning, I forgot how to tie my shoes. We're going to be all right. Don't let worry borrow our afternoon. When he naps, I sometimes take the jar down and read 1 or 2. I don't linger in sadness. I use them like stepping stones across a stream. When the water runs fast, I know where to put my feet. People ask me, sometimes, long after the pancakes and coffee, when the plates are pushed aside and the light in the kitchen goes easy, they ask, "How did you make it last?" In a world that changes its mind every 5 minutes, how did you keep choosing each other? I don't have a television answer. We didn't travel the world or build an empire. We didn't even agree on condiments. We made a life with what we had. A toolbox, a recipe box, a jar of notes, a porch, a swing, a dog who adopted us, neighbors who learned our names, and patience for the days when patience was the only thing we could afford. We apologized when we were wrong. We forgave when we were right but tired. We understood that some days the most romantic thing you can do is wash the other person's car without being asked. On our 42nd celebration of what we call our beginning, we drove back to that diner, which sits there still, pretending time hasn't got its number. Donna had retired, but her daughter, who'd once poured us milkshakes during prom season, brought us the pies and refused to take our money. "You two taught me what staying looks like," she said, blinking in a way that made her eyeliner brave. We sat at our old booth, vinyl still squeaking, and we ate, and I watched Tom take his time with the apple, the way he always does, like eating was something to be grateful for, not rushed. He looked up and caught me looking, and he winked. And in that moment, he was every version of himself at once. Young, tired, strong, luminous, worried, brave, mine. The hardware store is something else now, of course. I walked by the other day, and there were big windows and plants you have to miss. And I thought about going in and asking for a stud finder just to see what would happen. Instead, I stood at the corner a minute and let the memory run like a movie I know by heart. Young me, old me, all the me's in between. Him walking in with his cap backward, me behind the counter, both of us thinking we were just buying a tool and selling a tool, two men doing their jobs, both of us making the first small choice of the rest of our lives. This morning, like most mornings, I was up before him. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't empty but full. I made coffee, careful to set the mug on his side of the table in the same place every day, because the small consistencies matter. The radio played the weather. I thought about the tomatoes and whether the groundhog had gotten to them first. I opened the back door so the day could come in. When he padded out, hair at funny angles, he looked at me like I was exactly the person he wanted to see. And I thought, if a man gets to be looked at like that as many mornings as I have, that is wealth no one can tax. We sat, we sipped, and then he said, with the confidence of a man who knows where he is, even when he doesn't, "We should go for a drive later, maybe out past the river, see if the trees are getting ready to show off." I nodded, because even if the trees aren't ready, we will be. We'll pack sandwiches, we'll drive slow, we'll roll the windows down if the pollen isn't mean. He'll choose the station. I'll reach for his knee at the first yellow light, and I'll feel the same thing I felt that night on the bridge when he reached for my hand. Oh, I'll think. There it is. To anyone watching, maybe with a cup of tea or a small dog snoring at your feet, I hope our story feels like a quilt you can pull up under your chin. I hope it makes you think about the person you call yours, or the person you're hoping to find. My advice, if I have the right to give any after all these years, is simple. Show up. Not just when the light is good and there's something to post. Show up when the sink's clogged, when the line at the pharmacy is long, when there's one last slice of pie, and you know they want it. Write notes. Make lists. Keep them. Say I'm sorry when you should. Laugh as often as you can, especially when you shouldn't. Put the phone down. Watch their face. Catch them when they miss a step. Let them catch you. Make a home you can afford, together. Plant something? Name it after a joke only you two understand. Remember the names of your neighbors. Wave to the mailman. Learn to fix one thing well. Learn to ask for help. Learn over and over how to say yes. We are not extraordinary. We are, in the best way, ordinary as bread. And what a relief. Bread feeds people. Bread holds together a sandwich when you only have ham and mustard and heart. We are the loaf that rose in a warm kitchen, that was sliced and shared. We are the crust you dip in soup. We are the smell that brings people home. Sometimes, late, when he's asleep and the house is the quiet kind of safe that tells you you did something right today. I stand at the kitchen sink and look out at the yard. The porch light makes a small circle on the grass, and I think about circles. The one we drew around our life and defended. Gentle, but firm. The ring on my finger that clicks against the coffee mug in the morning. The way my mother's wedding band sits in my nightstand. A circle inside another. People who loved before us, after us, around us. A long line of steady hands. If there are years left, and I hope there are, I will spend them the same way I spent the years behind us. Finding small ways to say the big thing, which is simply this. You are my man, not as a possession but as a promise. My partner on the good roads and the roads that need patching. My hand to hold when the river runs high and when it doesn't. My favorite, hello. My patient goodbye. My reason to keep the porch light on. And if you're ever in our town and you see an older couple on a swing, 2 mugs between them? A dog who thinks she owns the block? Don't be shy. Wave. Tell us your name. Sit a spell if you want. We'll listen. We've got sugar. We've got stories. We've got time. That's my man and me. That's our story. Not a fireworks show, though we've had our share of sparks, but a steady lantern on a long walk home. May your lantern burn like that. May your road be kind. May you find your person in a hardware store, a diner, a park, a church picnic, or your very own living room. May you have the courage to write a time on a napkin and the patience to wait at a booth, and the grace to be the person who shows up. And when you find them, I hope the years are as sweet and ordinary and miraculous as ours. Because in a world that wants to sell you grand things, there is nothing more grand than a Tuesday night when the soup is good, and the man you love looks at you like every promise you ever made was kept. He's in the next room now, humming something I can't quite place. It sounds like Sam Cooke, but it might just be the tune of our house, the one the fridge makes when the ice maker kicks in, the one the window rattles when a truck goes by, the one the floorboard sings when that one step remembers your face. He calls my name, soft, the way you do when you know how it will land, and I say, coming. And I am. I always am. I turn off the porch light because the sun is fine today, and I look at the dent in the table and I think, we did all right. Then I go to him, the man I chose, the man who chose me, and the door between us opens like it has 1,000 times before, and will, I pray, 1,000 times more.